A warm welcome to everyone in the anesthesia class. The topic for today is neurophysiological monitoring. See, the importance of neurophysiological monitoring lies in the fact that the most threatening thing for a patient while undergoing a surgery is if you can feel, if you can see, if you can hear, and if he can perceive that sensation of surgery going on. Yes, that is the awareness that yes, something is going on. That is the biggest threat a patient has before he goes to surgery. And that is where the importance of neurophysiological or oblique neurological monitoring lies. When we talk about the neurological monitoring, this is important to ensure a adequate depth of anesthesia for a patient. That is, it's a very delicate balance, a seesaw balance between over anesthesia such that it takes a lot of time or maybe it is dangerous for a patient and the patient never comes out of the anesthesia, and on the other side the patient is aware of what is happening. So we have to balance these two conditions. Then the thing that you all have to remember from the past slides is what is the stage of surgical anesthesia. The stage 3 or the plane 3 of the Goodell stages of anesthesia is the stage of anesthesia that we all have to or want to achieve. Secondly, general anesthesia is a state of drug induced yet reversible loss of consciousness, because of which, even intraoperatively, the patient can come out of your anesthesia if your doses, your concentration, or the time interval in which those drugs are being given is inappropriate. Now, what is recall? See, the first question that is very important when we talk about intraoperative awareness is that recall is the ability of a human being to retrieve the stored memory he has. And it is the explicit memory. Please remember, it is the explicit memory that is most affected by our anesthetic drugs. Which memory is most affected by anesthetic drugs is the explicit memory, which is the conscious memory and an intentional recollection of the events, unlike the implicit memory, which is the recall without consciousness. It is just a perception. Coming over to what is amnesia. See, if you all remember that amnesia is one of the components of general anesthesia. And when talking about amnesia, most of our anesthetic drugs are known to cause enterograde amnesia. That is, the drugs are intended to be given such that all the events that happen after the drug has been given gets erased from the memory. But there is one more kind of amnesia, which is retrograde amnesia, in which one of the drugs of anesthesia, which are benzodiazepine, is quite good. That is, if you want to erase something in past, that is, retrospective memory can be erased by using certain anesthetic drugs like benzodiazepines. So mostly anesthetic drugs act on your explicit memory and your enterograde, leading to enterograde amnesias. Now, what is awareness in anesthesia? See, when we talk about the depth of anesthesia, it is a continuous process of CNS depression along with a decreased perception of the stimuli the patient has to feel. Of course, if the patient is aware during anesthesia, it is psychologically very distressing, and the long term sequelae of this could be a post traumatic stress disorder. I repeat again, the patient can post operatively remember the explicit memory, and this can happen immediately post operatively until up to 1 month. Please remember this, either it can be immediate, but the effect of the awareness of anesthesia can be up to 1 month also. For this, we have a questionnaire which is quite frequently asked to the patients in post-operative period, which is known by the name of modified Bryce questionnaire. It is a set of 4 to 5 questions, like if you're aware of anything, did you hear anything, etc., in which the points are given, and then it is decided whether the patient was aware during surgery or not, and subsequently, according to the questions, the therapy to the patient is therapy, or you can say counseling to the patients or the patient's relative is done. So please remember the time for any post-stress disorder post surgery could be up to 1 month, and the questionnaire which was used post operatively to judge whether the patient was aware or not is modified Bryce questionnaire. Moving forward, see, when we talk about the noxious stimuli during surgery or during when the patient is under anesthesia, our anesthetic drugs basically act on 2 pathways. One, the somatic, and other is the autonomic. We are responsible for decreasing the stimuli or the response of both these pathways. Somatic, which include your sensory pathway or your motor path. See, the sensory, all the sensations or the pain that the patient is felt will feel can be curbed by using certain drugs like opioids. Then the motor movements can be blocked by using your skeletal muscle relaxants. Talking about the autonomic include your breathing, your hormonal, your pseudomotor, and your hemodynamics. Talking about the breathing part again is depressed using muscle relaxants, or even opioids can do it. Talking about the hemodynamics, pseudomotor, and hormonal. All these things can be changed via using your inhalational and your induction drugs. And subsequently, when we talk about the regional anesthesia, the spinal and the epidural can also change the hemodynamics, the pseudomotor responses, and the hormonal responses of the surgery on the human body. Thus, anesthesia is responsible for curbing two major stimuli. One are the somatic stimuli in our body, and second are the autonomic stimuli. The reasons. Why is there awareness during anesthesia? What could be the reasons behind it? Of course, first, adequate dose was not given, as I've already told. The patient is having elevated anesthetic requirements, like, for example, pediatric patients. Sometimes we feel that pediatric patients should be given lesser dose, but please remember the volume of distribution in pediatric patients and their body surface area is very high, and thus higher range of the doses are required in pediatric patients to curb this intraoperative awareness. Then the patient is too ill, thus you have to limit, or you have to titer your anesthesia drugs to a greater extent. And lastly, there is malfunctioning of your anesthesia delivery system. Your vaporizer is not working, the inhalational agent is not working, there is some problem with the drugs, or there's some problem with the equipment that you are using. But one of the drugs which is most commonly related to intraoperative awareness is, if asked, neuromuscular blockers. Okay, neuromuscular blockers are known for their intraoperative awareness. Why? Because they are blocking all your skeletal muscle movements, but the patient is still conscious. So it is very, very dreadful. Even imagine one thing, that the patient is not able to move, but he's able to feel everything. The patient can feel that he cannot respire, but he can recall everything. Yes, that is the reason why neuromuscular blockers are known to cause intraoperative awareness. Now, where all can you use this neurophysiological monitoring? The first use, to balance the depth of anesthesia, as I've already told. Second is to minimize the risk of injury to the neural pathways. For example, we have certain monitorings like the evoked potentials, which actually check the integrity of your neural structures. Like, for example, it is used during spine surgeries, it can be used during brachial plexus injury surgeries, or you can say if some tumor resection has to be done in the brain or some seizure surgery is going on. So these are certain conditions where this neurophysiological monitoring actually help to decrease the risk of the damage to the neural pathways because we check the integrity of this pathway intraoperatively. And lastly, it helps us to create a window of opportunity such that we can protect or prevent or salvage the neural tissue which is at risk before it becomes irreversibly damaged. This is also done via using your evoked potentials. And when we talk about the balance anesthesia, here what we use is the BIS, EEG, or entropy. And for neural pathway, we use your evoked potentials. Now, the techniques to see or to know the depth of anesthesia is the first are the clinical parameters, that is your clinical judgment or your vitals. Second, the pharmacological parameters, and lastly, and the mostly used and one of the most reliable are the brain electrical activity monitoring. In this, what we actually do is that, see, the ions or the current is actually flowing in the extracellular fluid because of the postsynaptic potentials that are present in the brain, right? So what we do is we actually take the advantage of those currents that are moving in the extracellular fluid and convert those current into certain kinds of waves, and those waves are then transformed through certain digital monitors and using some algorithms in giving us some dimensions, some numbers, or some specific kinds of waves of specific amplitudes or some latencies to the stimuli that we give, such that it helps us to know what is the level of anesthesia the patient is under. We'll come to it one by one. The first thing that we talk about is the clinical techniques. You all have to remember this is used to check the depth of anesthesia clinically. That is your Evans score. The Evans score is, the mnemonic is PRST, Patient's Response to Surgical Stimuli. PRST, where the P stands for your pressures, that is, if the patient is aware the blood pressure increases. R, your respiratory rate. Of course, if the patient is out of your anesthesia and drugs, it will resume its own respiration. S, sweating. Because of the stress, the patient starts sweating. And lastly, lacrimation or tears. Because of the pain, the patient starts crying. These are all clinical parameters which have to be checked for knowing the intraoperative awareness. I repeat, Evans is the score in PRST. Patient's response to surgical stimuli, P for pressure, R for respiratory rate, S for sweating, T for tears. Coming over to second one, we check the skin conductance for sweating because it is assumed that as soon as the patient becomes aware, the sweating potential of the patient increases. And as the awareness increase, and so do the sweating increase. And as the sweating will increase, it will increase your skin conductance. And this is what is used to check the intraop awareness. And lastly, we have the isolated forearm technique, in which what we do is that we put a tourniquet in one of the forearms, and such that the pressure of the tourniquet is above your systolic blood pressure, and your skeletal muscle relaxants or your drugs are not able to reach this one arm. And after you think that you have anesthetize the patient completely, you can ask the patient to move this arm. And if by chance the patient is able to move this arm, this means that the patient is not fully under the anesthesia. That is your isolated forearm technique. The thing that you have to remember in this is that the pressure of the tonic wave that you have to use is more than the systolic blood pressure of the person. Then moving to the other parameters which can be used to judge the intraoperative awarenesses, electromyograms, EMG. The two places where electromyograms are actually used to check awarenesses: first, frontalis muscle, which is innervated by facial nerve, and these muscles are quite resistant to neuromuscular blockers. Thus, if some electromyogram activities are coming in this muscle, it means the patient is not fully relaxed yet. And last is your lower esophageal contractility. It is said that the lower esophagus contracts when the patient comes out, and that can be checked in the form of electromyogram. I repeat, if surface electromyogram has to be done to detect intraoperative awareness, the two areas where it is done is frontalis muscle, and second is lower esophageal contractility is checked. Then one of the clinical parameters we have is respiratory sinus arrhythmias. Yeah, we have heart rate variability when we talk about the intraoperative awareness. And what is that? It is nothing but a more than 10% change in which ECG wave, the P wave, that too over an interval of 5 minutes. I repeat, respiratory sinus arrhythmias are nothing but heart rate variability, because your heart rate changes during your inspiration and expiration. Please remember, during inspiration, this is very important on the point of view of medicine also, that during inspiration, what happens to your heart rate is, during inspiration, your heart rate increases, and during expiration, your heart rate decreases. And who actually govern this? This is governed by Bainbridge reflex and the stretch receptors which are present in the parenchyma of lungs. These are two things that will help in changing the heart rate. But if the change in this heart rate between inspiration and expiration is more than 10%, which can be evident by counting the P waves in over an interval of 5 minutes, then yes, the patient is becoming aware. So I've already told that during inspiration, because of the decrease in intrathoracic pressure, we have an increase in the venous return, and the increase in venous return will eventually, via the Bainbridge reflex, lead to increase in heart rate. The same for vice versa goes for expiration. When there is expiration, there is increase in intrathoracic pressure, decrease in the venous return, and because less blood is reaching the heart, so the heart think, let me relax a bit, and thus there is bradycardia. This is respiratory sinus arrhythmias. Now moving to the brain electrical activity monitors that I was talking about. The first and the foremost is EEG. EEG is one of the parameters which are used in seizure patients also, in which electrodes are put on the scalp of the patient, and what we are judging is the electrical activity of the brain. What we see in EEG is the electrical activity of the brain. As I've already told, there is a current which is flowing in the extracellular fluid, and waveforms of various frequencies and amplitudes, which is generally between 0 to 50 Hertz, is derived, and then we use Fournier's transformation, and these waveforms are then converted via using certain algorithms into alpha, beta, theta, and delta waves. I repeat, EEG is monitored by using electrodes on the scalp of the patient. And when we are using the EEG, we have various waveforms which are between the frequencies 0 to 50 hertz. These waves that are coming, they all are transformed using an algorithm which is known as the Fournier's transformation into four major waves: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. And all these four waves, they are going to tell us different levels of wakefulness. Please remember, the alpha, beta, delta, and gamma waves. What do they tell you? They tell us the different levels or the different stages of anesthesia. Now, with increasing depth, please remember, when the depth of anesthesia is increasing, the amplitude of these waves increase and the frequency, it always decreases. Via depth of anesthesia is increasing, the amplitude of the waves increase, the frequency of the waves decrease. So these are the waves, and yes, you have to remember which wave comes in what state of the mind. First is the beta waves. Right now, if you do EEG, we all will be having beta waves. Beta waves is for relaxed, fully arousable patients. We have beta waves and the patient is totally awake plus alert. Talking about the alpha waves are generally seen when the patient is conscious but calm and relaxed. The patient is calm. Now, coming over to the stages of anesthesia, in the stage 1, that is the analgesia state, the wave that comes is theta wave. In stage 2, excitement, that is the excitement stage, it is the theta wave that comes, but along with theta waves, we have two other specific characteristics of this wave, which are the K complexes and the sleep spindles. See how they are formed, why they are formed. It is beyond these discussions. So the stage 2, that is the exciting stage, have theta waves along with K complexes and sleep spindles. Moving to stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 4 is medullary depression and stage 3 is your surgical anesthesia. In both these stages, we can have your delta wave. And lastly, I just want to add one thing, that when we are talking about beta waves, when we have REM, rapid eye movement sleeps, at that time beta waves are generated in the EEG. Let me repeat it once more. Beta waves is patient is awake, alert, conscious. Talking about alpha wave, patient is relaxed, calm, conscious, but not thinking. There is no hyperactivity going on in the brain. Talking about theta wave, this is meditation, or you can say the surgical anesthesia, stage 3 wave also. And lastly, we have delta wave, which is found generally in stage 4, that is medullary depression, and the patient is quite deep if delta wave is coming. Talking about a little more about EEG. See, EEG is, as I've already told, it's a quantitative analysis. And when we talk about EEG, it has two types of analysis that can be done. One is the time domain analysis, that is how the waveforms are changing over time. Time domain analysis. And time domain analysis has one definition of importance in it, that is the burst suppression ratio. That is the proportion of time in which EEG is suppressed in total time interval. that is the burst suppression ratio. If so, example, out of the whole EEG of 1 hour, how many episodes of burst suppression, that is the EEG's amplitude decreased or the amplitude increased, the frequency, sorry, it decreased, has happened. It helps us to know about certain conditions like hypoxia, trauma, or whether we are using higher doses of anesthesia or the optimal doses. I repeat, the time domain analysis of EEG is used to tell us the burst suppression ratio. Then second, we have the frequency domain analysis. Talking about frequency domain analysis, the importance lies that this is another name for BIS, bispectral index, which is the most loved and most asked question of the NEET PG. That is your BIS. It is a function of frequency domain analysis. Till now, a lot of question about these values have been asked. So the new thing that one can add to this, that BIS is nothing but EEG, but the frequency domain analysis of EEG. Now talking a little in detail about BIS. See, BIS was first introduced by Aspect Medical System. It is nothing but a electrophysiological monitor of the body in which we see how the current is flowing in the form of waves, and finally using certain algorithms what we get is a dimensionless value on a monitor. Let's see. See, this is your BIS sensors that has been put on your frontal part. This is your frontal part. BIS is always a frontal processor. This is the most commonly used monitor. I repeat, BIS is the most commonly used monitor, but it is not the most sensitive one. It is only the commonly one. What it tells us about the hypnotic level of the patient, and it has a dimensionless value between 0 to 100. Now talking about the BIS, if the patient is normal awake, the BIS is 80 to 100. And what we target is a BIS of 40 to 60 during general anesthesia. Below 40, we have deep hypnotic state, and less than 20 means burst suppression and cortical silence eventually. So the BIS value that we want is only 40 to 60. When the patient is awake, the amplitude is less and frequency is very high. And vice versa, when the patient is going deep, 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 the amplitude increases and the frequency is very slow. And lastly, if you have zero BIS, it means you have a complete flat line of EEG, or also known as isoelectric EEG, in which such waves are not found. This is a very, very recent introduction to BIS, that is the 4-channel Medtronic BIS monitor, and anticipating that something new definitely comes. So I just want you to get introduced to the various components of this monitoring. This monitoring includes electromyogram, your spectral edge frequency, total power, signal quality index, and suppression ratio. This is just a theoretical point, that is, in the BIS newly launched BIS monitor, we have all these parameters that can also be judged. Electromyogram, activities of your muscle, spectral edge frequency, total power of the patient, the signal quality index, and eventually the suppression ratio. Other than EEG and BIS, then we have one more parameter known by the name of patient state index, whose value lies between 25 to 50. The next we have is the narcotrend. Narcotrend is again a form of EEG in which the EEG is converted into 6 stages among A to F, in which A is awake, F is silent. Last we come to is entropy. See, when we are talking about entropy, as you all must be aware, entropy is a physics term which signifies certain disorders or asynchronies which are going on in our brain, and that irregularities, that disorders are used to calculate the entropies. Okay, and the anesthesia drugs are known to decrease those irregularities. So entropy can be used to judge the intraoperative awareness, like if the patient is aware, then the entropy irregularities will increase. Entropy was first of all introduced by Dietrich Omeda. It is nothing but irregularities. Two types, state and response. The response entropy actually works in addition to the electromyogram. That is, if there is a muscle activity that is going on, at that point response entropy is most sensitive. Coming over to state entropy, it is between the range of zero point 0.8 to 30 hertz, and the response entropy is above 47 hertz. One thing that you all have to remember is that when we are talking about an anesthetic agent, that is your nitrous. Nitrous oxide is not monitored preferably using entropy, and this should always be used if you're using nitrous oxide in the patient. I'm sorry, there's no two. Nitrous oxide. Preferably, BIS is used to monitor this anesthetic agent, that is your nitrous oxide. Now, eventually, talking about how our anesthetic drugs are going to behave on this BIS. See, when we talk about muscle relaxants, I told you they're very notorious in the awareness of anesthesia. Thus, when muscle relaxants are used, then spuriously, which is not true, the BIS values are low. Talking about the nitrous oxide, in nitrous oxide and ketamine, what we have is elevated BIS. Okay, your BIS is more when you are using your nitrous oxide and ketamine. Hypothermia also, it decreases the BIS. Opioids, it can also depress the BIS, but there are 4 drugs which can never lead to zero BIS. That is, they can never achieve an isoelectric EEG. And you all have to remember these 4 drugs. One is the opioid, benzodiazepines, dexmedetomidine, and eventually halothane. These 4 drugs are known never to cause an isoelectric EEG. See, whatever the value of BIS comes, BIS, you can remember, like anesthetic drugs, it will lead to decrease in the BIS value and vice versa, with the exception of 2, nitrous and ketamine. Then mild hypoxia and hypercarbia. If it is mild, then the patient or the body knows that one has to compensate. For that, the EEG excitation is seen. But if it is advanced, irreversible, then you have depression on the EEG. Hypothermia, cerebral ischemia eventually lead to progressive depression of EEG. Lastly, as I've already told, that there are certain drugs which have some different effects on BIS, like, I repeat, nitrous oxide, ketamine. What they both do is they elevate BIS. Opioids, dexmedetomidine, neuromuscular blockers. They have more or less effect on BIS, but still BIS is not the best monitor to measure the depth of anesthesia when you are using these drugs like nitrous, keta, and dexmedetomidine. For these three drugs specifically, BIS is not preferred. Like I repeat, in entropy, I told you that for nitrous oxide, entropy is not preferred, and when we have BIS, then ketamine, nitrous, and dextrometamidine are not preferred to be monitored using BIS values. Now coming over one of the more important parameters, that how can you judge the depth of the anesthesia? It is by using your end tidal anesthetic concentrations, that is via gas analysis. See, if we are not able to have this brain electrical activity monitoring, so we can assume that if the MAC, that is the minimal alveolar concentration that is displayed on these screens, is between zero point 0.7 to 1.3. Everyone, please pay attention to this fact that whatever is given on the slide is very important. Okay. When we talk about the adequate depth of anesthesia that is achieved at a MAC of zero point 0.7 to 1.3 MAC. What is MAC? It is the alveolar concentration of the inhaled anesthetics at sea level, which is required to suppress any movements to a surgical stimulus in 50% of the patients. For example, if you have 100 patients, so MAC value of one of the inhalational agents would be the alveolar concentration of inhaled anesthetics such that 50% of the whole patients are not able to move to a surgical stimulus. Now MAC values are, there could be many MAC values. One is MAC awake. MAC awake means that we have to stop the voluntary response to verbal commands in 50% patients. I repeat, MAC awake is that I have to suppress voluntary movements to a verbal command in 50% of the population, and that can be achieved by using 0.3 MAC. You have to remember that MAC awake is only 0.3 or 30% of your MAC. MAC amnesia, that is to suppress your interrogate or explicit memories. It is very less, only 0.25 MAC of inhalation anesthetic is required for interrogate amnesia. Then MAC for endotracheal intubation. A value of inhaled anesthetic such as 50% of the total population can be intubated at this MAC. This is a higher MAC of 1.3. MAC endotracheal intubation is almost 1.3 times the MAC value for a given inhalational anesthetic. Then last, talking about MAC bar. MAC bar is used, that what is the MAC value at which the autonomic responses to surgical stimulus can be stopped, and this is the highest, which is 1.5 max. Once I repeat, in order to have an adequate depth of anesthesia, the MAC value that is required is 0.7 to 1.3. Done. We have various kinds of MACs. For example, we have MAC awake. MAC awake is no voluntary movements on verbal commands in 50% of the population, right? And it is 0.3 MAC. MAC amnesia, that is the patient should forget all the interrogate amnesia should be there and explicit memory should be vanished. That is 0.25 MAC. MAC endotracheal intubation, that 50% of the patients can be intubated smoothly at this level of inhalational anesthetic. That is 1.3 MAC. And lastly, MAC bar, it is to block the autonomic responses to the surgical stimulus, and it is more or less 1.5 times your MAC value. So this was about the inhalational agents. When we come to the intravenous induction agents, in order to judge the depth of anesthesia by only knowing how much dose or the concentration of the intravenous agent you have given, you can use various definitions. Like first is ED50 of a drug can be used. That's the median effective dose that reduces the effect in 50% of the population. That is ED50 can be known to you. Similarly, we should know about the lethal dose of that anesthetic in 50% of the population. Then ED95, that is 95% have responded. This is mostly used for neuromuscular blocking monitoring, in which single twitch is used. So the most common use of ED95 is in single twitch suppression. Then SCP50, that is concentration of the drug in 50% of the population to see the effect. And same as the CP95, the concentration of the drug in the plasma such that the effect can be seen in 95% of the population. Now moving to the very last monitoring of neurophysiological, that is the evoked potentials. See, evoked potential is a very extremely extensive topic, but we are going to talk only about some basics of evoked potentials that are potentially asked. See, evoked potential which is used is a localized area of the brain, brainstem, midbrain, cerebral cortex, which is used for specific stimuli that are given. Through evoked potential, what we do is we give a specific kind of stimuli, which could be sensory, auditory, motor, or visual. A stimuli is given, and what we check is the response of the localized areas of brain to that stimuli. That is your evoked potential. It is a time versus voltage relationship, and the two things that we measure while using the evoked potential is the amplitude and the latency. That is the time gap that has to be given. So evoked potential actually measures two quantities. One is the amplitude and the other is the post-stimulus latency. This is actually used to check the neural integrity, specifically in certain procedures, as I've already told, like spine surgeries, brain surgeries, brachial plexus surgeries. Now, there are four main kinds of evoked potentials that are used. The first is the somatosensory evoked potential. It is very commonly used, in which what we do is we give a stimuli to a peripheral mixed nerve, and what we see the responses to, we see a sensory response to that stimuli of the body. These evoked potentials, I'll give you an example. They're actually used, for example, in a spine surgery. The surgeon is dealing with those spinal nerves, and even if one spinal nerve gets transected, the patient can undergo hemiplegias, right? So that is the importance of SSEPs or MEPs, that they help us to know the neural integrity while the surgeon is operating on the patient. So the first and the most commonly used evoked potential is somatosensory potential. Second we have is the visual evoked potentials. In the visual evoked potential, we give LEDs as a stimuli in the form of goggles, and then we stimulate the optic nerve at around 2 Hertz, eventually to get a result in the form of visual evoked potential. Then we have auditory evoked potential, also known by two names, brainstem and middle latency auditory evoked potential. Here I add that the middle latency auditory evoked potential is the most sensitive of all this monitoring of EEG versus BIS or entropy, or you talk about your evoked potentials. So the most sensitive is middle latency auditory evoked potential. It is more sensitive than others, and the most commonly used is BIS. I'll repeat again. If the question states very clearly which is the most common monitor, it is BIS. And if it states which is the most sensitive monitor, then it is your middle latency auditory evoked potential. This is the best indicator of depth of anesthesia. And lastly, we have a motor evoked potential also. We have somatosensory for the sensory part, visual for the vision, auditory for the hearing, because hearing reflexes are the last reflexes that go. And beauty is that they are the first ones to come back also. So they go first but come back earlier. Thus, this makes it very sensitive to know the depth of anesthesia. Now, the effects of the anesthetic drugs on the evoked potential, I've already told. Then when we are dealing with evoked potential, we are talking about two quantities. One is the amplitude and other is the latency. Latency is frequency basically, whether it is more or less. Hypoxia, hypothermias, ischemias or injuries. Eventually they will lead to decrease in frequency, or you can say the latency period will increase and amplitude will decrease. Talking about the inhalational agents, all the halogenated agents, with the most potent one is isoflurane, which is used when we have to judge the evoked potentials. It increases the latency, decreases the amplitude. Halothane is least preferred. Please remember, if it is said which is the inhalational of choice, if we have to judge the evoked potential intraoperatively, the answer will be isoflurane, and which is the worst one will be halothane. Okay, talking about the nitrous oxide. In nitrous oxide, the latency has no effect and only amplitude decreases. And thus, in many major cases, nitrous oxide monitoring is also not done with the help of evoked potential. I repeat, halothane is not very good in those surgeries in which evoked potential have to be judged, and similarly, the use of nitrous oxide is also not recommended in the surgeries where evoked potential is being checked. Talking about the barbiturates or thiopentones, they work in the same manner, that is, they increase the brainstem latency. Propofol also, it will increase the amplitude and decrease the frequency, increasing the latent period. Talking about the benzodiazepines, the benzodiazepine also increases the latency and it decreases the amplitude. Lastly, and the most important thing that you all have to remember is these four drugs. These four drugs have no significant effect on evoked potentials and thus not used when we have to judge the evoked potentials to see the neural integrity intraoperatively. Ketamine, opioids, dexmedetomidine and NMBs. These all can be used as supplements to other drugs, but if you want to check your somatosensory, then yes, you prefer always to give a isoflurane. And of course, if you want to check the motor evoked potential, then muscle relaxants are not preferred or not given. Ketamine, opioids, ketamine, opioids, dexmedetomidine and neuromuscular blockers have no significant effect on evoked responses. Thank you. That was all about the neurological monitoring. But I want to give a quick recap to some points which are very important here. First, the most sensitive of all is middle latency auditory evoked potential, but the most commonly used is your BIS. If it comes, which is the best indicator of depth of anesthesia, that are your auditory evoked potentials. And then auditory evoked potential are also used in certain surgical procedures, specifically the neurological surgeries like spine surgeries, your tumor resection surgeries of brain, your brachial plexus surgeries, and etc., in which the neural integrity is of prime importance to be checked. Then intravenous drugs can be also used as a surrogate indicator of the depth of the anesthesia, and you all should know what are the definitions of all this. ED50, lethal dose, ED95, mostly used in neuromuscular blocking agents, plasma concentrations in 50% and 95% of the patients. Eventually, the MAC values are very important. MAC awake, MAC amnesia, MAC endotracheal intubation, and MAC bar. We have to maintain a MAC of zero point 0.7 to 1.3 to have an adequate depth of anesthesia. Then we talk about your EEGs. In EEGs, the four drugs which can never cause isoelectric EEG, that is zero EEG or full cortical suppression, are opioids, benzodiazepines, and dexmedetomidine. They can never cause it. Entropy, narcotrend, the value of this 40 to 60 has to be maintained at the general anesthesia. It should not be 20 or less than 20. Moving forward, what was BIS? BIS is nothing but frontal processor EEG, which checks the hypnotic level of the patient, and it is a dimensionless value. Okay, there are no dimensions to BIS. BIS is a frequency domain analysis of EEG. EEG has a time domain and a frequency domain analysis. BIS is frequency domain. Talking about the alpha beta waves. Beta waves when the patient is alert, alpha when the patient is relaxed. And the stage 3, the surgical anesthesia stage, has which kind of wave? Delta waves. Which kind? Delta waves. That is your EEG and the clinical parameters that can be judged. And thus, this is the end of this very session. Thank you.